While the Bible may be the best-selling book of all time, not all versions fly off the shelf. In fact, the slowest-selling book of all time is David Wilkins' translation of the New Testament from Coptic into Latin. First published in 1716, the book remained in print for 191 years, despite only selling on average 2 copies a year. We are racing through the Bible, and this is 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. Are you ready? Let's go. Church history tells us that the author of these 3 letters was the Apostle John. He calls himself the elder in the 2nd and 3rd letters. He also wrote a gospel and the book of Revelation. Nobody was closer to Jesus during his ministry than John. Along with Peter and James, John was often asked by Jesus to go with him for times of prayer or special insight. Jesus had transformed John's life, and John wanted to pass that transformational message on to anyone willing to listen. In the first letter, John does not mention his audience by name, but it is very clear that they are believers that he cares deeply about. Most likely, the first letter was intended to be circulated among many churches in Asia where John ministered. 2nd John was a general letter written to a specific but unknown church in Asia. Again, John must have had an intimate relationship with them. 3rd John was written to a Christian named Gaius who lived in and served the church in Asia. The way these letters were written leads some scholars to believe that there was a community consisting of a network of smaller congregations that sprang from the same source and belonged more or less loosely together. These letters were written to deal with problems that had arisen in the church. Some deceptive people had made their way into the small Christian community and began questioning some of the teachings that the Christians believed. Their line of reasoning went something like this. Anyone can look around and see that this world is corrupt and evil. So anything of this physical world is impure. A pure God can never create an impure world, so the world must have been created by evil demons. That means physical bodies must be impure, and Christ, being from heaven, could never inhabit an impure body. And that must mean that Jesus was simply God pretending to be a man. When Christians objected to this reasoning, they specifically brought up John's teaching as their authority. So the false teacher said that John could not be trusted, and John responds by calling them liars in 1 John. And since wrong teaching inevitably leads to wrong living, these false teachers also denied the reality of sin in a Christian's life. Well, since our pure spirits are locked in impure bodies, we can't be held responsible for any wrong thing that we do. My body made me do it. Eventually, when the Christians kept resisting this new teaching, the false teachers formed their own group and they dragged some of the less discerning Christians away with them. In Paul's letters, he writes almost like a teacher with carefully arranged arguments and teachings. James writes as a shepherd taking care of his flock, nudging his listeners along where they need to go. Peter writes, as Peter. But John writes as a father with a tender voice concerning a beloved child. The theme of John's letters is hard to generalize. It's centered on the power of the true message. By that message, we know that we are Christians and we have fellowship with God. Walk in the light and love of truth and beware of the many liars and selfishly ambitious who try to thwart it. These letters were written late in John's life, probably in the 90s. There are a few things to look for in all 3 of John's letters, like simple words. After all, he calls them children. John uses easy words like love and light and darkness and sin. John puts the truth on a level that anyone can understand. And despite the simple language, notice the profound concepts. The language may be simple, but the ideas are not small. Think enough about these things and there is no limit to the implications. For instance, God is love. Well, that's a pretty simple sentence, but who can grasp the love that is embedded in God's character? Also of note are the dramatic contrasts. John liked to present his ideas in black and white with no gray and no shades of meaning. In 2 John, the church John wrote to had a wonderful reputation of hospitality and sacrificial love. John commended them for their love, but urged them to use greater discernment towards those that they welcomed into their homes and into their assemblies, lest they unintentionally contribute to a traveling teacher who is spreading lies. In 3 John, notice the contrasting characters of Diotrephes and Gaius and Demetrius.